the chains of the heart. The handcuffs clicked shut around Maya, Reyes's wrists on a Tuesday morning that smelled like rain and regret. She had stopped fighting a long time ago, not because she had given up, but because she had learned that fighting, in the wrong direction, only draws blood from your own hands. She stood in the intake corridor of Harlow County Detention Center, her dark eyes scanning the cold, fluorescent light above her as if she were memorizing the shape of the world one last time. Before it swallowed her whole, she had been convicted of a crime she did not commit. Fraud charges, tied to a shell company her ex-partner had built in her name while she was sleeping beside him, trusting him, loving him with everything she had. Now she wore an orange jumpsuit and a silence so heavy it could have been a second skin. Officer Serena Voss was the one who processed her. Serena had been with the department for 7 years, and in that time she had seen every kind of broken person walk through those doors. She had learned to keep her eyes professional and her chest armored. She was tall, composed, and carried the particular stillness of a woman who had survived grief by turning herself into something unshakable. Her colleague and closest partner, Officer Dana Calloway, stood nearby reviewing intake files, her auburn hair pulled back and her jaw set with the quiet authority of someone who had once been soft and had chosen, deliberately and painfully, not to be anymore. The two of them worked the Harlow facility like clockwork, efficient, respected, and emotionally sealed behind layers of protocol and procedure. They had been partners for 4 years. They had also, though neither had said it aloud in a language they were ready to hear, been falling in love with each other in the slow and devastating way that quiet people fall, the way a river carves through stone, not with violence but with persistence, not with noise but with time. Maya said nothing during processing. She answered questions in flat single syllables. She did not cry. She had already cried in the car alone before dawn, parked outside her now empty apartment while her sister's voicemail played on loop because her sister had stopped picking up. When she entered her assigned cell block, she sat on the edge of the narrow bed and stared at the wall, and something in her expression made Serena pause at the door just a half-second longer than necessary. It was not pity. Serena didn't do pity. It was recognition, the kind that passes between two people who have both once sat in a room, feeling like the universe had mistaken them for someone who deserved to suffer. The first few weeks were mechanical. Maya kept to herself. She read whatever she could get her hands on, paperback thrillers with broken spines, legal theory books she requested from the facility library, anything that kept her mind sharp and her spirit from calcifying. She was filing her own appeal documentation with the help of a paralegal volunteer, working backward through the paper. Trail, her ex-partner, had left like a man who never expected to be followed. Serena noticed her dedication, not in a way she acted on, but in the way a person notices a flame burning in an unexpected place and finds themselves walking past it, more than necessary just to feel the warmth. Dana noticed Serena noticing. That was how it started, really. Not with Maya, but with the truth that Maya began to surface in both of them. Dana had spent 4 years cataloging all the small, unspoken things between her and Serena. The way Serena laughed only for real around her, the way their hands lingered during the exchange of files, the way they had once sat in Serena's truck in a parking lot for 2 hours after a difficult shift just talking. And neither of them had wanted to be the one to open the door and end it. Dana had told herself 100 different stories about why what she felt wasn't what she felt. She had dated men in between those stories, and it had always felt like wearing shoes on the wrong feet. Functional enough to walk in, but wrong in a way her bones knew even when her mind refused to. It was during a routine wellness check that things shifted. Maya had been caught trying to pass her appeal paperwork to a guard she trusted, who had promptly confiscated it under a vague facility regulation, and when Serena arrived at her cell for the wellness check, she found Maya sitting on the floor with her back against the bed frame and her knees pulled to her chest, not crying, but breathing in the particular way that people breathe when they are trying not to come apart. Serena sat down on the floor across from her, outside the cell, through the bars, and she did something that surprised them both. She stayed. She didn't file a report. She didn't recite protocol. She just stayed until Maya's breathing slowed, and then she quietly arranged for a legal aid supervisor to retrieve the confiscated documents the following morning, through proper channels, because she had read enough of what Maya was working on to know that the woman in front of her had not just been wronged. She had been systematically destroyed by someone who had loved her and was now rebuilding herself one legal clause at a time. Dana found out because Serena told her. She told her at the end of a shift, sitting on the hood of Serena's truck in the facility parking lot the way they always did when something was too heavy to carry inside a building. Serena didn't frame it as a confession of inappropriate feelings. She framed it as a crisis of conscience. She had seen something unjust happening to someone who deserved better, and she had acted on it quietly. And she needed Dana to know because she couldn't carry something alone that she had built them to carry together. Dana listened without interrupting, which was one of her great gifts. And when Serena was done, Dana reached over and put her hand over Serena's. And she left it there, and neither of them moved for a long time, and the night air around them felt like a held breath that the world had been waiting years to release. What followed was not a romance that erupted. It was one that was uncovered. The way archaeologists uncover things in carefully, reverently brushing away layers of accumulated caution to find something that had always been there, buried alive and still warm. Dana and Serena began to speak the truth to each other in increments. A word here, a look held a moment too long there. A night when Dana's car wouldn't start and Serena drove her home and walked her to the door, and they stood on the porch for 20 minutes, talking about nothing meaningful, while meaning everything. And then one evening Dana said simply that she was tired of pretending she didn't feel what she felt. And Serena closed her eyes for a moment, the way a person closes their eyes when something they've been waiting for finally arrives. And the relief of it was so complete it almost looked like grief. Maya's appeal began to move, slowly then faster. The paralegal supervisor who had recovered her documents connected her to a non-profit legal firm that specialized in financial fraud cases involving identity exploitation. New evidence emerged, digital timestamps, metadata, a former employee of her ex-partner who had been waiting for someone brave enough to build the case before she came forward. Serena and Dana followed the process from the outside, professionally removed, but inwardly invested in a way that complicated the clean lines of their job and made them better at it. Paradoxically, because caring about someone's humanity inside a system designed to reduce people to case numbers is an act of radical professional courage. On the morning Maya was released, 9 months after she had entered, her conviction overturned by a judge who issued a rare written apology along with the ruling. Serena was on shift. Dana had come in on her day off. Neither of them would have admitted why if asked. Maya walked out of the processing room in her own clothes for the first time in 9 months, and when she saw Serena standing near the exit doors, she stopped. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she walked over and stood close and looked at her, with the particular expression of someone who is trying to put a feeling that has no edges into the container of a face. Serena extended her hand for a handshake, professional, proper, and Maya took it and held it for a breath longer than a handshake requires. And in that extra breath was everything: gratitude, recognition, the knowledge that a stranger had chosen to see her as human at a moment when the world had voted otherwise. Maya went on to work with the non-profit legal firm that had freed her, becoming an advocate for wrongfully convicted women, particularly those whose identities had been weaponized by intimate partners. She was brilliant at it. She carried her suffering like a torch rather than a wound, and it lit the way for others. She and Serena met occasionally for coffee, carefully within the bounds of what was appropriate and what had simply become a real and gentle friendship between two people who had shaped something in each other without meaning to. Dana was always there too, usually beside Serena in the way that people stand beside each other when they have made a permanent decision about proximity. Serena and Dana built their life together quietly, in the way that suits people who have spent years being louder than they needed to be just to survive. They moved in together after a year. They planted things in a small backyard garden. They argued about small things and talked through big ones. They chose each other every morning with the kind of deliberate Unglamorous devotion that doesn't make headlines but makes lives. They had found each other not in spite of the difficulty of their work but because of it. Because standing inside a system that grinds people down had forced them to ask, daily, what they believed about dignity and mercy and love, and they had always, quietly, answered the same way. There is something the world rarely tells you about love. It does not always arrive as a lightning bolt. Sometimes it arrives as a woman, sitting on the floor of a prison corridor at midnight because someone needed a witness. Sometimes it arrives as a hand placed over another hand in a parking lot, wordless and warm. Sometimes it is uncovered, in the middle of grief and injustice and long, institutional corridors that smell like industrial, cleaning products and second chances. Sometimes love is the most radical, defiant, structural thing a person can choose, not despite the difficulty of the world they move through, but inside it because of it, as a direct and personal response to everything that tries to make tenderness impossible. If this story made something move inside your chest, if it reminded you that kindness is never small, and that love can be found even in the hardest places, please take a moment right now to like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they are seen. Your support helps stories like this one reach the people who need them most. And every single like is a vote for the kind of storytelling that believes in the humanity of every person, regardless of where they are or what they've survived. Before the story ends, there is one thing being asked of you. Leave a comment below telling what part of this story stayed with you, because these words were written for you, and hearing how they landed matters more than you know. And as the screen fades and the words settle, remember this on somewhere right now. Someone is sitting in the hardest moment of their life, and all they need is for one person to stay. Be that person. That is the whole story. That is the only story that has ever mattered.